Clarabelle Thist knew the cut was wrong before the soldier stopped shaking. Enemy claws tore unevenly. Wolf teeth left crescent pressure around the wound. Iron from rival packs burned black at the edge. This cut was clean, angled, and shallow at the entrance, deep at the pull. A disciplined blade had made it, one that belonged inside the line. She pressed 2 fingers above his ribs and looked across the Red Moon war tent at Alpha King Radnor Kelm. "This did not come from the Windridge wolves," she said. The tent went quiet around the word "did not." Rain struck the canvas in hard red streaks. Wounded soldiers lay on low cots beneath swinging lanterns. The air smelled of wet fur, fever leaf, iron, and war reports drying near the command table. Clarabelle had worked in that smell for 40 years. She had stitched boys who became commanders, commanders who became ghosts, and one young alpha who had once survived because she ignored an order to leave him behind. Radnor stood with his war cloak half unfastened, blood drying on one shoulder that was not his. His eyes were dark, tired, and already guarded. War surgeon Halric stepped between them with a folded report in his hand. "Clarabelle is exhausted," he said, calm enough to sound kind. "The wound is confused by shift trauma. Older healers sometimes read yesterday's field through today's body." Clarabelle did not lift her voice. "A wound does not become confused because a man wants his report clean." Halric smiled faintly. "And yet you accuse elite command blades without blade proof." "I asked for the blades to be tested." "You asked to delay the campaign." Radnor's jaw tightened. "We march before moonrise." Clarabelle looked at him then. Not at the king. At the man whose pulse she had once held while enemy wolves circled them in snow. "Then march with the truth in front of you," she said, "not behind the bodies of common soldiers." A murmur moved through the tent. Common soldiers heard it. Officers heard it differently. Halric lowered his voice, but not enough to keep the room from listening. "Your Majesty, this is the 3rd time she has interrupted casualty recording with unsupported suspicion. Morale cannot survive a healer teaching soldiers to fear their own officers." Clarabelle wrapped the wound with a strip of plain moon silver linen. The fabric was old battlefield issue, made to record wound heat, venom, metal trace, and cutting pressure. It did not heal. It remembered what entered the body. Beneath her fingers, it remained pale. "Morale should fear a lie before it fears me," she said. Radnor's gaze dropped to the bandage, then to her brown-spotted hands. Something moved in his face. A memory he did not want in front of men who needed him hard. "Clarabelle," he said. She hated the softness of her name in his mouth. It always came when he wanted her to yield without making him command it. "No," she said. "Do not make my age tender now. You were glad of it when my hands knew how to keep your wolf from bleeding out." Halric's eyes sharpened. Radnor went still. The old story had never been entered into heroic record. A younger Radnor had ordered retreat. Clarabelle had disobeyed, dragged him from a snow ditch, cut poisoned silver from his side, and endured censure for refusing to let an alpha die correctly. Now, he looked at her across another field of wounded men and chose the cleaner page. "You are removed from active war tent authority," Radnor said. The words did not strike loudly. They struck legally. Clarabelle finished tying the bandage before she answered. "On what charge?" "No charge," Halric said gently. "Relief, rest, protection from your own overstrain. That is a soft word for erasure." Radnor's mouth tightened. "You will step outside while Halric's surgeons complete treatment and casualty record." Clarabelle stood slowly. Her knees hurt, her back hurt. She stood as if neither had earned a voice. "I have buried enough boys to know the difference between rest and removal," she said. "Write the order honestly." Radnor did. His signet pressed red wax into the removal slate, while every wounded man watched. Clarabelle took off her healer's apron and laid it across the command table. Halric reached for it. She placed one finger on the cloth. "Not yours." Radnor's eyes lifted. She met them. "You may remove my authority. You do not inherit what it cost." Then a horn sounded from the ridge. The next attack came before moonrise. Clarabelle stood outside in the rain, while Halric's royal surgeons wrapped the new wounded in fresh moon-silver linen. She heard screams, orders, wolves shifting badly under pain. She did not enter. No one had called her. Then the first surgeon stumbled backward through the tent flap. His hands were clean. The bandage in them was not. Bloodless silver writing crawled across the linen, bright as cold moonlight. Not enemy claw. Pack steel. Inside the Red Moon war tent, every moon-silver bandage wrapped around the new wounded began writing the same warning. First, wound linen witness. After Alpha King Radnor Kelm removed Clarabelle Thist from active war tent authority for accusing command blades without blade proof, the moon-silver battlefield linen on the new wounded recorded pack steel, not enemy claw, showing that the fresh wounds carried internal line blade trace rather than East Ridge wolf damage. The first wound linen witness did not prove Halric had ordered the cuts. It proved only that the new wounds carried pack steel, not East Ridge claw. Radnor Kelm stood in the torn mouth of the Red Moon war tent while rain ran down his war cloak and silver words spread over the bandages behind him. Common soldiers lay rigid beneath fresh wrappings. Royal surgeons had stopped moving, not because the cloth had healed anyone, but because it had recorded what their reports had not. Not enemy claw. Pack steel. Halric took the nearest bandage in both hands and held it toward the lantern. Moon, silver linen records. Contamination, not attacker identity. Clarabelle stood outside the flap, wet to the bone, her healer's apron still on the command table where she had left it. No one had invited her back inside. "Read the medal before you read the report," she said. Radnor turned toward her. "Can pack steel enter a wound during treatment?" "Yes," Halric answered at once. Clarabelle answered after him. "Not under the skin at the entry angle." A soldier on the nearest cot closed his eyes, as if someone had finally spoken the shape of his pain. Halric lowered his voice. "Battlefield blades cross, contaminate linen. Injured men pass through command tents. East Ridge wolves have stolen steel before. Emergency triage cannot wait on symbolic cloth." "The cloth is not symbolic," Clarabelle said. "It records wound heat, metal trace, and cutting pressure. If the steel touched the wound after treatment, it would sit on the outer wrap. If it entered with the cut, it writes beneath the first fold." Radnor looked at the soldier's bandage. "Open the fold." Halric's hand closed over the linen. "Your Majesty, removing fresh dressing risks blood loss." Clarabelle's expression hardened. "Then do not remove it. Turn the moon edge." The royal surgeon hesitated. Radnor said, "Do it." The surgeon turned the outer edge. The silver words did not smear. A second line appeared underneath, thin and exact. "Metal trace, seated at wound entry." Radnor's jaw tightened. Halric nodded gravely, as if the record had helped his case. "Trace proves contact, not timing." Clarabelle lifted one hand toward the line without crossing the threshold. "Ask when the steel entered the wound." Radnor looked at the bandage. "Can it answer that?" "If the wound was still hot when the steel entered, yes." The royal surgeon touched a bone needle to the script. The linen brightened, then drew a narrow crescent beneath the words. "Entry heat, active wound." Halric turned. "Quiet. Fear worsens shift pain." "No," Clarabelle said. "Lies worsen it. Fear only tells the body someone may finally listen." Radnor looked at her then, and the old memory came between them like snow. He had been 26, bleeding into frozen grass, growling at her to retreat. She had pressed her hand into his side and said, "If I obey you, you die correctly." Now he had obeyed Halric and removed her cleanly. "Were command blades cleaned before triage?" Radnor asked. Halric's answer came smoothly. "Of course," Clarabelle said. "Then their forge trace should not be inside fresh wounds." Radnor faced the officers gathered near the command table. "Bring the East Ridge iron sample." A scout produced a dark splinter from an enemy spear. The surgeon laid it beside the bandage. The moon-silver linen remained pale. Halric said, "Enemy iron varies by carrier." "Bring Red Moon Command steel," Clarabelle said. The officers stiffened. Halric gave a faint, sorrowful smile. "This is precisely why I warned you, Your Majesty. She is teaching wounded soldiers to see commanders as butchers." Clarabelle's voice did not rise. "If a blade is innocent, linen will not insult it." He drew his own command dagger and placed it flat beside the bandage. The linen stayed pale. Halric spread one hand. "There, command steel is cleared." Clarabelle shook her head. "Your blade is crown, forged. Officer issue is line forged. Different moon temper." Radnor looked to his captains. "Lay down officer issue." No one moved. That silence did more damage than argument. At last, a young captain unbuckled his blade and set it beside the cot. One by one, 3 others followed. The surgeon touched the bandage edge to each weapon without cutting the linen. The first 2 produced no mark. The third made the silver writing flare. The linen was not naming the hand. It was matching the moon temper in the steel. Not enemy claw. Pack steel. A new line formed under it. Red Moon Command issue. The captain stepped back. That blade was in the retreat line. It never touched him. Clarabelle looked at the soldier on the cot. Tell the Alpha King where you were cut. The soldier's mouth worked. Behind the ridge, Alpha. After the retreat horn. Halric spoke sharply. He is fevered. Clarabelle did not glance at him. Ask who wanted the blade test, delayed until after moonrise. Radnor stood very still. Outside, another wounded man cried out as his bandage began to write. Blade trace discrepancy. The metal trace in the new wounds matched Red Moon Command steel issued inside Radnor Kelm's war line, not enemy iron from the East Ridge Wolves. The blade trace discrepancy did not prove Halric Dune had ordered Red Moon soldiers cut after retreat. It proved only that the metal trace matched command steel issued inside Radnor Kelm's war line. Rain kept falling after the linen matched Red Moon Command issue, but no one in the Red Moon war tent heard it anymore. They heard the wounded soldier instead. After the retreat horn, he had said. Those words made every officer remember where he had been standing, and every common soldier remember who had been standing behind him. Halric Dune moved first. Fevered soldiers misremember retreat sequence, he said. Pain bends time. Shift trauma makes the body swear to things the mind cannot keep straight. Clarabelle Thist remained outside the tent flap with rain sliding down her gray hair. She had not been invited back inside. Read timing before testimony, she said. Radnor Kelm looked toward her. Can the linen tell when the steel entered? Halric answered. It can mark heat, not battlefield location. Clarabelle nodded once. True, she continued. So ask whether the wound was opened under ridge rain or tent heat. A royal surgeon looked down at the bandage. It records weather? It records wound environment, Clarabelle said. The first heat of a wound carries what touched it first, rain mineral, smoke resin, horn ash, or tent steam. The linen keeps those traces in order. Halric's smile stayed careful. A poetic explanation for unreliable cloth. The cloth is less poetic than your report. Radnor stepped closer to the cot. Turn the first fold again. The surgeon obeyed. Silver letters shifted without bleeding through the linen. Entry heat, active wound. Beneath it, a second line began to show. Wound air, enclosed canvas, fever leaf steam, red resin smoke. Radnor read it twice. That is tent air. Halric said, wounds remain active after transport. A man cut on the ridge can bleed under tent air. Clarabelle's voice stayed even. Then the ridge rain would be under the steel and the tent air over it. Radnor turned. Test that. Halric lifted one hand. Your Majesty, emergency triage cannot become a lesson hall for old wound superstition. Clarabelle did not look at him. Ask why the cuts are clean, after a retreat that was not. The captain whose blade had flared went pale. It was chaos behind the ridge. Exactly, she said. Chaos tears. Careful hands draw. A low growl moved through Radnor's chest. Test sequence, he ordered. The surgeon placed a bone needle under the first fold and touched the line marked Red Moon Command issue. The moon silver linen brightened, then arranged its script in 3 shallow layers. Outer trace, tent steam. Middle trace, pack steel. Base trace, no ridge rain. Radnor looked at Halric. No ridge rain. Halric's expression became grave. The men were covered before they reached triage, cloaks, shields, bodies. Ridge rain can be absent even from honest wounds. Clarabelle said, then read the retreat horn heat. A surgeon blinked. The what? Wolf war horns carry moon ash. When they sound, the ash enters open wounds for 3 minutes. If these men were cut during the ridge attack, the horn ash should sit above the wound heat. If they were cut after retreat, it will sit below or not at all. Radnor stared at her. How long have you known that? 40 years. His jaw tightened. 40 years, and still he had chosen Halric's report before her hands. Halric said, Moon, ash drift varies by wind. Clarabelle finally looked at him. Then let Wind excuse you in writing. The surgeon touched the linen again. The surgeon drew the bandage snug, only enough to align the folds. The silver words drew themselves into a narrow witness line. Retreat Horn Ash, absent at cut entry. The captain stepped back. No, we all heard the horn. Clarabelle looked at him. Hearing a horn is not the same as being cut before it. Radnor faced the wounded soldier. Were you carried from the ridge? No, Alpha, the young man swallowed. I walked. We were behind the casualty line when it happened. Halric spoke quickly. Under shift pain, soldiers confuse extraction lines. Clarabelle's face changed. Not anger, something colder. I have not touched that man since you removed me. Radnor's gaze went to the red wax seal bearing his signet. Did I remove Clarabelle before asking when the cuts were made? He asked. No one wanted to answer. Clarabelle did. Yes. The word did not forgive him. It put him in sequence. Another bandage on the far cot began to write, then another. The same lines appeared beneath the moon's silver folds. Base trace, no ridge rain. Retreat Horn Ash, absent at cut entry. Wound air, enclosed canvas. Halric's voice lowered. This proves only that the cuts were examined in the tent. No, Clarabelle said. It proves they were opened after the men left Ridge Weather. Radnor looked past the officers to the rear casualty flap, where command boot prints led toward the dark. Who was behind the casualty line after the horn? He asked. No officer answered. The surgeon drew the nearest bandage into alignment once more, and the last witness line appeared. Timing cut discrepancy. The moon-silver linen recorded that the pack steel cuts entered the new wounds after retreat from the East Ridge, not during the ridge attack. The timing cut discrepancy did not prove Halric Dune had ordered the wounds made. It proved only that the pack steel cuts entered the new wounded after retreat from the East Ridge, under enclosed tent air rather than ridge rain. That left one narrow question standing in the Red Moon war tent. Who had held the wounded before they reached Clarabelle Thist's table? Halric Dune answered before Radnor Kelm asked. Casualty corridors are controlled for safety, not secrecy. After a retreat horn, every wounded soldier passes through surgeon order. Clarabelle stood at the threshold, rainwater gathering at the hem of her dress. The removal slate still lay on the command table. She had not crossed the line where Radnor had placed her outside his authority. Read access before guilt, she said. Radnor looked at her. What access? The corridor between the ridge and the tent. Ask who stood between the wound and the record. Halric's expression remained grave. War surgeons stood there, as they should. We separate dying men from shifting men, claw poison from silver cuts, officers from common panic. Procedure is not conspiracy. No, Clarabelle said. Procedure is where conspiracy hides when men write it neatly. Radnor turned to the rear flap. Mud had been tracked through it in 3 directions. Stretcher drag, soldier boot, officer heel. He had walked past those marks an hour ago. He had seen them as war. Now he saw them as sequence. Bring the corridor tags, he ordered. One of Halric's younger surgeons stiffened. Your Majesty, those are intake notes. Then bring them. Halric did not object quickly. That was the first thing Clarabelle noticed. A surgeon brought a ring of red leather tags, each punched with moon marks and tied with bloodless cord. Clarabelle did not reach for them. Radnor saw that. Will you read them? No, I am removed from active authority. She added, ask your surgeons to read their own work. The words made him stand inside his order. The young surgeon read the first tag. Brenvale, ridge extraction, entered corridor after retreat horn. First handling under surgeon line. Radnor said, was he wounded before handling? Halric answered, all men entering casualty corridors are presumed wounded. Clarabelle said, presumed is not recorded. The surgeon looked down. Wound status on entry, walking, no active bleeding marked. A cot creaked as the soldier named Bren tried to sit up. Radnor's voice changed. Read the next. Tomber Heth, entered corridor after retreat horn. Walking, no active bleeding marked. Another tag. Edrin Malk, walking, no active bleeding marked. The tent began to understand too slowly and all at once. Halric stepped forward. Those marks mean no visible bleeding at corridor entry. Internal wounds can open later under shift strain. Clarabelle's eyes stayed on the tags. Ask why men with no active bleeding entered my tent with fresh pack steel cuts. Radnor looked to the royal surgeons. Who controlled the casualty gate? Halric answered, My office. That is not a name. My surgeons, under my authority. Which surgeons? Halric's tone cooled. Do you want triage names or battlefield victory, Your Majesty? The Ridge is not waiting for us to indulge an old healer's suspicion. Clarabelle's mouth hardened. The Ridge can wait for men who were cut after leaving it. Radnor stared at the tags. Were command blades present behind the line? An officer near the rear flap shifted his weight. Halric spoke first. Command officers moved through the corridor to identify casualties. That is normal. Were any blades cleaned there? Tools are cleaned after triage. Clarabelle said, Ask whether command blades were cleaned before the blade test I requested. A silence opened. Radnor's eyes moved to the wash basin near the rear flap. The water inside it had a faint silver film across the top. Who ordered the basin changed? He asked. No one answered. Halric gave a measured sigh. Infection control requires constant washing. This is battlefield medicine, not a parlor hearing. Clarabelle finally crossed one step into the tent. Only one. Not to reclaim authority. To point at the basin. Then the basin log will say treatment wash, not blade wash. Radnor nodded to a surgeon. Read it. The basin log was a strip of linen tied to the iron stand. The surgeon untied it with shaking fingers. Wash changed after second retreat intake, he read. Reason, steel rinse. Halric said, steel tools. Clarabelle said, then test the rinza. A moon silver strip was dipped into the basin water. It brightened slowly. Red moon command issue. The same moon temper. Radnor looked from the basin to the corridor tags, then to the wounded men. Common soldiers entered walking, he said. No active bleeding. They passed through your corridor. They came to the tent with fresh command. Steel wounds. Halric bowed his head. Correlation is not harm. Clarabelle looked at Radnor. No, it is access. That is all this proves. He held her gaze, shame moving behind his eyes, because she refused to overclaim after he punished her for truth. Outside, another horn sounded from the ridge. Radnor did not move. Casualty line access record. After the retreat horn, the soldiers later found with pack steel wounds passed behind the retreat line through a casualty corridor controlled by Halric Dune's war surgeons before entering the Red Moon War tent. The casualty line access record did not prove Halric Dune had ordered the wounded cut. It proved only that the soldiers later found with pack steel wounds passed through his controlled corridor after the retreat horn. Halric understood the difference and moved into it like a man stepping behind a shield. Corridor control is not blade control, he said. War surgeons manage wounds, not every weapon carried by frightened officers in retreat. Clarabelle Thist remained one step inside the Red Moon war tent and no farther. Rainwater fell from her sleeves onto the packed earth. The removal slate still sat on the command table, red wax intact, her authority cut from the room by Radnor Kelm's own signet. Read cleaning before excuse, she said. Radnor looked toward the wash basin near the rear flap. Which blades were cleaned before Clarabelle's requested test? No officer answered. Halric gave a tired, reasonable sigh. Your Majesty, tools are washed constantly in a war tent. Surgical knives, claw hooks, silver needles, officer blades used to cut straps or free armor. Clean metal is not conspiracy. It is infection control. Clarabelle's gaze moved over the basin, the hanging cloths, the rack of wet steel. Ask whether hygiene waits until after accusation. Radnor turned to the young surgeon holding the basin log. Read the time of the wash. The young man's throat worked. After second retreat intake. Before or after Clarabelle asked for blade testing? Halric spoke quickly. The request was informal. Clarabelle answered. Then your report should have had no trouble ignoring it. Radnor's eyes cut to her, and for one instant the old battlefield passed between them again. Snow, poison, his younger wolf snarling at her to obey. She had not obeyed then. He had punished that courage now. Read it, Radnor said. The surgeon looked down. Blade test requested by Clarabelle Thist. Time entered. Before moonrise march order. And the wash? Radnor asked. After request. Before preservation. The tent tightened around the last word. Halric lifted both hands slightly. Preservation was never ordered. Clarabelle's voice stayed flat. Because I was removed before I could order it. Radnor absorbed that without defense. His jaw flexed once. Did Halric's office know she asked for testing? He asked. The young surgeon looked at Halric. Clarabelle said, "There is your answer," before he gives it. Halric's expression cooled. "Careful, Lady Thist. Suspicion dressed as cleverness still limps. And procedure dressed as mercy still cuts." A wounded soldier made a small sound from the nearest cot. Not laughter. Pain recognizing a shape. Radnor stepped to the command table and lifted the removal slate. He did not break it. He did not undo it. He only placed it beside the basin log so the two records sat under the same lantern. "Read both in order," he said. The surgeon swallowed. Clarabelle Thist requests blade testing. Alpha King Radnor Kelm removes Clarabelle Thist from active Wartent authority. Basin wash changed. Reason, steel rinse. Evidence preservation, not entered. Halric said, "That sequence proves haste." Clarabelle looked at Radnor. "Ask who benefited from haste." Radnor did not ask yet. That restraint hurt more than refusal because she could see the question forming and still not leaving his mouth. Halric saw it too, and moved first. "Your Majesty, every minute spent accusing command blades delays treatment. The wounded need surgeons, not theater." Clarabelle looked across the cots. "Then move the common soldiers out of this tent before you continue using them as a wall." The room shifted. Radnor's gaze sharpened. "Why? Because if the blade records turn against the officers, those men will be lying under the same hands that touched them behind the line." Halric's voice softened. "You are frightening injured soldiers." "No, I am describing where they are." Radnor looked at the men on the cots. Common soldiers, mud on their boots, fear held behind clenched teeth. Men who had watched her be removed and had still waited for her voice to tell the room where pain began. "Move them to the old supply tent," Radnor ordered. "Under guard. No officer enters without my command." Halric bowed his head. "That will announce distrust." Radnor's answer came low. "Distrust has entered the record." Clarabelle did not thank him. Protection after harm was not restoration. A surgeon brought forward 3 cleaned officer blades from the casualty corridor rack. Their edges shone too perfectly. "Moon, silver strip," Radnor said. Halric stepped closer. "Cleaned steel may not retain trace." Clarabelle replied, "Cleaned steel retains omission if washed after a pending test." The surgeon wrapped a narrow moon silver strip around the first blade. Nothing. The second. Nothing. The third brightened faintly, not with a wound mark, but with rinse sequence. Wash applied after blade test request. No preserved pre-wash trace. Radnor stared at the line. Halric said, "Absence of trace is not guilt." Clarabelle's eyes remained on the blade. "No, it is absence made after warning." Radnor looked at her then, and the shame in his face had weight, but no right to comfort her. Blade cleaning omission. The Red Moon command blades near the casualty line were cleaned before Clarabelle Thist's requested blade test could be performed. The blade cleaning omission did not name the hand that made the wounds. It proved only that the command blades near the casualty line had been washed after Clarabelle Thist asked for testing and before their pre-wash trace could be preserved. Halric Dune stood beside the basin, as if cleanliness itself were his witness. "Cleaned blades are not criminal," he said. "If we begin treating hygiene as evidence, every surgeon in this tent becomes suspect." Clarabelle watched the common soldiers being carried through the side flap toward the old supply tent under Radnor's guard. One boy clutched his bandaged ribs and looked back at her, as if she were the only person left who knew where his pain belonged. She did not follow him. "Not yet. Read handling before motive," she said. Radnor Kelm turned from the departing stretchers. "First handling?" "The first hands on a wound decide what the record becomes," Clarabelle said. "Ask whether treatment began before those men reached my table." Halric's answer came smoothly. "Emergency stabilization often begins in the corridor. Pressure cloth, shift restraints, breath drafts, nothing improper. Then the treatment tags will say stabilization," Clarabelle replied. "Not wound closure." Radnor looked to the young surgeon still holding the red tag ring. "Read the handling marks." The surgeon hesitated. Halric's voice softened. "Careful, Nerit. Half-read tags can condemn honest work." Clarabelle did not look away from the boy. "Whole-read tags can condemn dishonest work." Radnor's jaw tightened. "Read them whole." Nerrit selected the first tag. Bren Vale, corridor entry after retreat horn. Walking, no active bleeding marked. First handling, surgeon line pressure wrap. Clarabelle asked, was the pressure wrap removed before moon, silver linen? Nerrit swallowed. No removal entry. Halric spread one hand. In crisis, entries fall behind hands. Bodies do not, Clarabelle said. Read the wound status after pressure wrap. Nerrit's lips moved over the line. Active bleeding marked after first handling. The old supply tent went quiet beyond the side flap. Radnor heard it. He entered with no active bleeding and was marked bleeding after your surgeon line touched him. Halric answered. Pressure can reveal hidden bleeding, Clarabelle said. Pressure reveals. It does not create a clean blade track. Radnor pointed to the next tag. Read. Tomber Heth. Walking. No active bleeding. First handling. Surgeon line restraint. Active bleeding marked after restraint. Another. Edrin Malk. Walking. No active bleeding. First handling. Surgeon line pressure wrap. Active bleeding after handling. A captain near the command table muttered, that could still be shift break. Clarabelle turned her head. Shift break tears outward, these cuts pulled inward. The captain looked away first. Halric's calm became heavier. Your Majesty, she is converting triage language into accusation. These men were in pain. They could not remain untreated while she debated blade philosophy. Clarabelle stepped another pace inside the tent. Only another pace. She could feel the line of Radnor's removal order behind her, like a chain she refused to pretend was gone. Ask why treatment began before they reached the war table, she said. Ask why common soldiers were handled out of sight, then brought to me only after their first wounds had already changed. Radnor looked at Halric. Who assigned surgeon line handling? My office assigned corridor teams. Names. Halric's eyes cooled. Under battle conditions, teams rotate. Names. Nerrit's hand shook over the tag ring. Surgeon Merrick. Surgeon Allen. Surgeon Vey. Under whose authority? Halric's pause was brief. So brief. Mine. The word did not prove guilt. It proved command structure. Clarabelle let it stand without reaching for more. Radnor saw that restraint and seemed to dislike what it did to him. A shout rose from the old supply tent. One of the guards pulled back the flap. Alpha. The bandages are writing again. Radnor moved first. Clarabelle followed, but not because he had made room for her, because the common soldiers were there. Inside the old supply tent, moon-silver bandages shone under low lantern light. The men had been separated from the commanders. Their fear looked different now, less buried, more dangerous. On Brenvale's bandage, a new witness line had formed beneath the earlier trace. First handling before Red Moon War Tent. Surgeon line pressure wrap. Wound change after first handling. Active bleeding opened. Tomber's bandage showed the same. Adrian's too. Halric entered behind them, voice controlled. Wound change after handling does not mean harm by handling. Clarabelle nodded. Correct. Radnor looked at her sharply. She said, it means the wound record changed under surgeon line authority before it reached my table. That is all. You always stop before accusation, Radnor said quietly. She looked at him then. I learned to stop where evidence stops. You should have learned that before you signed my removal. The words cut deeper because she spoke them low. Radnor accepted them with no answer. Halric turned to the gathered guards. This review is frightening wounded men during active war. If any soldier shifts from stress, the responsibility will not be mine. Clarabelle faced him across the supply tent. Then let them testify before their bodies are used as your warning. A soldier lifted his head. Not Bren, not Toomber. A quieter man with gray mud dried along his cheek. I was not bleeding when Surgeon Merrick took me behind the screen, he said. Halric's gaze snapped to him. Radnor saw it. So did Clarabelle. The soldier swallowed. I was bleeding when I came out. Treatment before tent record. The soldiers later found with fresh Red Moon command steel wounds received first handling behind the retreat line under Halric Dune's war surgeon authority before they reached Clarabelle Thist's war table. The old supply tent did not erupt after the soldier spoke. It did something worse. It listened. Clarabelle Thist stood among common soldiers whose bandages glowed under lantern light, and for the first time that night, the wounded were not being treated as noise around more important men. Radnor Kelm looked at the quiet soldier with mud dried along his cheek. Your name. Joran Pike, Alpha. Halric Dune's voice came gently from the tent entrance. Joran, you are under strain. No one will punish confusion born from pain. Clarabelle turned toward him. Do not wrap fear in kindness and call it medicine. Halric gave her a sorrowful look. I am protecting the witness. No, she said. You are softening him before he names a place. Radnor's gaze sharpened. What place? Joran swallowed. The screen behind the casualty line. A surgeon near the flap shifted. Clarabelle heard the cloth of his sleeve move before she looked at him. Read screen handling before memory, she said. Radnor turned. There are screen records? There should be, she answered. Any soldier taken from corridor view before war, tent entry must be marked with reason, handler, and condition before and after. Halric sighed. Private screens protect soldier dignity during shift distress. Then the record will say, shift distress. Radnor looked at the young surgeon Nerrit. Bring the screen slate. Nerrit looked at Halric. Radnor's voice cut lower. Look at me when I give you an order. The boy flinched and went. Clarabelle felt something small twist behind her ribs. Radnor had always been dangerous when he finally chose a target. She hated that it still moved her to see him choose correctly, too late. Halric stepped closer. Your Majesty, separating wounded men from commanders during an active march will weaken discipline. Clarabelle looked around the supply tent. Discipline already failed them. Radnor did not answer. That was answer enough. Nerrit returned with a slate wrapped in gray cloth. Its edges were damp from corridor mist. Radnor took it himself. Joran Pike. Nerrit read, voice thin. Corridor entry. Walking. No active bleeding. Screen handling. Curtain 3. Handler. Surgeon Merrick. Reason. Shift check. Clarabelle asked. After condition? Nerrit's throat moved. Active bleeding. Pressure wrap applied. Joran closed his eyes. Another soldier lifted his head. Mine too. Radnor turned. The soldier's voice cracked. Curtain 2. Surgeon Allen. I was told to bite leather because my wolf might wake. Halric said. Shift checks are painful when ribs are unstable. Clarabelle took one step toward the cots. No more testimony with Halric's surgeon standing over them. The tent went still. Radnor looked at her. Clarabelle? She did not let the softness pass. No, you do not get my name as a bridge over what you signed. His face closed around the blow. She faced the soldiers. No commander gets treatment from my hands until every common soldier in this tent is moved beyond officer reach and allowed to speak without a surgeon correcting his pain. Halric's eyes cooled. You no longer hold authority to refuse treatment. Clarabelle looked at the removal slate still visible through the open tent flap, lying on the command table like a wound with wax on it. Then I refuse as a woman with 2 hands and 40 years of knowing what men look like before they die, she said. You may call that disobedience if your reports need another clean word. Radnor's voice was rough. Move the soldiers. Halric turned to him. Your Majesty, the commanders are wounded too. Then they can wait. That cost him. The officers heard it. So did the soldiers. So did Clarabelle. And she hated that a necessary order could still sound like the beginning of repair. She would not let it be enough. 2 guards began clearing the supply tent's rear side. Common soldiers were moved cot by cot behind a line of shield bearers, loyal only to the Alpha's direct command. Clarabelle walked with them. Radnor followed at a distance. When a captain reached for Clarabelle's sleeve, Radnor caught his wrist before the man touched her. Do not, he said. Clarabelle stopped but did not turn around. Protection after disbelief is not proof of honor. Radnor released the captain. I know. No, she said. You are beginning to. The words stayed between them, alive and unfinished. Behind the shield line, the screen slate was placed beside the glowing bandages. Nerrit read 3 names. Merrick, Allen, Vey. Each had marked walking soldiers as shift checks. Each soldier had emerged with active bleeding. Each moonsilver bandage recorded pack steel at entry heat. Halric's voice came from beyond the guards. Screen handling proves medical privacy, not harm. Clarabelle answered without raising her voice. Then let the screens show privacy. Radnor looked at her. She pointed to the gray cloth still clinging to the slate. Curtain fabric keeps wound spray. Test it. A moon silver strip was pressed to the first curtain scrap. It brightened. Pack steel. Active wound heat. No shift claw residue. A soldier began to shake, but not from fever. Radnor read the line once, then again. Halric did not speak. Screen handling testimony record. The soldiers later found with fresh pack steel wounds were taken behind casualty line screens for surgeon-marked shift checks and emerged with active bleeding before entering the Red Moon war tent. By sunrise, the shield line around the common wounded had become the only honest border in the camp. On one side lay soldiers with moon-silver bandages glowing over their ribs, thighs, and shoulders. On the other stood officers who had spent the night learning that clean reports could be dirtier than blood. Clarabelle Thist moved between the cots with water, fever leaf, and her bare hands. No one had restored her authority. That mattered. When a young guard tried to call her chief healer, she corrected him without looking up. Lady Thist is enough until the record is repaired. Radnor Kelm heard it from the tent entrance. The words landed where his crown would have sat if he had worn one. He had left his war crown on the command table beside the removal slate, the basin log, and the curtain scraps bright with pack steel. The officers noticed. Clarabelle noticed too. She gave him no reward for it. Halric Dune stood behind him, still composed. Your Majesty, the common wounded are protected. The immediate danger has passed. We should return to campaign order before the ridgeline interprets delay as weakness. Clarabelle tied a fresh outer wrap around Joran Pike's bandage. Read presence before courage. Radnor stepped farther into the supply tent. Presence? The men were taken behind screens. Surgeons marked shift checks, but surgeons are not the only ones who crossed the screen line. Halric's tone cooled. Officers identify casualties. That is duty. Then duty has a ledger. Radnor looked to Nerrit. Bring the screen line access ledger. Nerrit hesitated only once before obeying. That was new. A small repair, Clarabelle thought. Not his, the room's. Halric folded his hands. Access ledgers show movement, not harm. Clarabelle nodded. Correct. Radnor looked at her sharply. She met his eyes across the cot. You keep expecting me to accuse beyond the record because that is how I was accused. He did not answer. Good. Silence was the first truthful thing he had given her without asking her to carry it. Nerrit returned with a flat slate stitched in red cord. Mud crusted one corner. The access marks were written in charcoal and sealed with moon wax. Radnor opened it himself. Read the entries after retreat horn. Nerrit swallowed. Curtain 1, Surgeon Merrick. Officer Presence. Captain Voust. Curtain 2, Surgeon Allen. Officer Presence. Lieutenant Grell. Curtain 3, Surgeon Vey. Officer Presence. Captain Orlan. The three officers stiffened in different ways. Voust looked angry. Grell looked offended. Orlan looked at Halric before he remembered not to. Radnor saw it. Clarabelle did too. Halric spoke gently. Officers entered to identify their men and restrain shift panic. Common soldiers respond better to familiar command voices. Joran's voice came from the cot. Captain Orlan told me not to embarrass the line. Radnor turned to him. When? Behind curtain 3, before the cut opened. Orlan snapped. You were half-shifted and fevered. Clarabelle's hand paused over Joran's bandage. Do not correct his pain from the side of the knife. The supply tent went still. Radnor faced the officers. Lay down your command blades. Halric stepped closer. Your Majesty, disarming officers before common soldiers will fracture discipline. Radnor's answer was low. Discipline fractured when walking soldiers left your corridor bleeding. Clarabelle felt that sentence move through the tent. It was not enough, but it cost him something public. The officers laid their blades on a clean cloth. Radnor did not let Halric touch them. He turned to Clarabelle. What test? She looked at the blades, then at the wounded. No test until every soldier who passed behind those curtains is named and moved beyond those officers' reach. They already are. No, she said. Beyond their reach in record. Enter it. Radnor took the silver quill himself. Protected witness status. Common soldiers removed from officer custody by Alpha Order. His hand paused before the next line. Public error entry. Clarabelle Thist requested blade testing before removal. Alpha King Radnor Kelm removed her before preserving officer blades. The tent had no sound. Clarabelle looked at the words until they stopped hurting enough for her to breathe around them. Radnor set down the quill. I cannot unwrite what I signed. I can enter what it damaged. She did not forgive him. She did not thank him. She said, "Now read the blades beside presents." Nerrit placed each officer blade beside its matching curtain record. Moon silver strips lay between steel and slate, not touching skin, not touching wounds, only comparing access to trace. Faust's blade stayed pale. Grell's blade flickered once. Orlan's blade wrote slowly. Screenline presence matched to command steel trace. Yoren shoot his eyes. Halric said, "Presence and trace are still not intent." Clarabelle looked at Radnor. "No, but they are no longer absence." Officer screen access record. The screenline access ledger showed Red Moon officers entered the casualty screens with command blades before soldiers emerged with fresh pack steel wounds, and Radnor Kelm entered Clarabelle Thist's removal as damage to evidence preservation. Officer screen access did not prove a staged retreat. It proved that command blades and wounded common soldiers had shared the same hidden space before the moon silver linen spoke. Clarabelle Thist understood the danger of that middle ground. Too many men could still live inside it. Halric Dune, Captain Orlan, any officer clever enough to stand near harm and call nearness duty. So she did not move toward accusation. She moved toward choice. "Lay the soldier records beside the officer blades," she said. Halric's mouth tightened. "Lady Thist, you have already separated the wounded, delayed the campaign, and frightened the command line. What more do you intend to take?" Clarabelle turned from Joran Pike's cot. "The part of the truth that was kept under a screen." Radnor Kelm stood between the shield line and the officers, his crown still absent, his signet still beside the removal slate. "Do it." Halric looked at him. "Your Majesty, a healer removed from authority cannot direct an evidence hearing." "No," Clarabelle said. "I cannot direct your war tent. I can refuse my hands." A commander near the rear flap laughed once. "You would refuse wounded officers?" Clarabelle faced him calmly. "Until the common soldiers are permitted to testify without correction, yes. You swore a healer's oath. I swore not to let power decide whose pain counts first." Radnor's eyes moved to her with something sharp and wounded in them. He had heard the judgment inside the vow. He had earned it. Clarabelle pointed to the cots. "Begin with Joran Pike. Curtain 3. Surgeon Vey. Officer presence, Captain Orlan. Command blade matched to screen trace. Wound opened after retreat. Now place his linen beside Orlan's blade." Nerrit obeyed. His hands no longer shook as badly. The moon silver strip between bandage and blade brightened, not wildly, not angrily, only in the clean order of matching trace. Wound source pattern. Same moon. Temper. Same pressure angle. Same pull direction. Joran covered his eyes with one hand. Captain Orlan stepped forward. "I used that blade to cut his armor straps." Clarabelle looked at the bandage. "Then the linen will show strap fiber." Nerrit touched the script with a bone needle. No leather fiber recorded. Only wound entry. The silence that followed was not empty. It had weight. Halric said, "A single officer blade cannot prove policy." Clarabelle nodded. "Correct. Read the next." Tomberheth's bandage was placed beside Lieutenant Grell's blade. The strip flickered, then wrote, "Same moon temper, shallow entrance, deep inward pull, no armor fiber." Grell went white. "I was ordered to assist triage." Radnor's voice changed. "By whom?" Halric answered before Grell could. "By my corridor surgeons, under emergency procedure." Clarabelle did not chase the name. "Read Edrin Malk." Edrin's bandage lay against a blade issued to Captain Faust. It stayed pale. Faust exhaled too loudly. Clarabelle said, "Absence matters too. Remove Faust from the line of accusation." Radnor looked at her. "You would clear him?" "If the record clears him." The words struck him harder than blame. She was still protecting truth from convenience, even when convenience could have served her anger. Halric seized on it. "Then, the records are inconsistent." "No," Clarabelle said. "They are specific." A guard entered from the old supply tent. "Lady Thist, Commander Bren's fever is climbing." At the word commander, the officers turned. Brenvale had been a common soldier an hour ago. Clarabelle's eyes sharpened. "Not commander. Common line." The guard swallowed. "Common line, Brenvale." She moved toward the side flap. Radnor followed. "Clarabelle." She stopped. He did not reach for her. He had learned that much. If he worsens, will you treat him? Yes. And the officers? She looked back at the command line. When every common soldier who passed behind those screens has spoken, and when no officer blade remains unentered, Halric's voice hardened. You are holding care hostage. Clarabelle answered, No, I am refusing to let care be used as silence. Then she crossed fully into the protected side of the tent, leaving Radnor outside the shield line with the men whose authority he had believed first. Brenvale lay sweating beneath a bandage that had begun to write faster than the others. Clarabelle knelt beside him and placed 2 fingers at his pulse. Tell the Alpha King what happened behind curtain 1, she said. Bren's eyes rolled toward Radnor. Captain Orlan said the retreat looked cowardly, said common wounds would make the report believable. Orlan shouted, Liar. The bandage under Clarabelle's hand wrote 1 new line. Statement aligns with wound pattern. Halric went still. Clarabelle rose slowly. Now, she said, we can begin asking who taught officers to turn soldiers into proof. Screen weapon pattern record. The moon silver bandages matched specific Red Moon officer blades to specific common soldier wounds by moon temper, pressure angle, and pull direction, while clearing blades that did not match. The shield line did not move after Brenvale spoke. For the first time since the retreat horn, common soldiers stood protected while officers waited to be read. Clarabelle Thist looked from Bren's bandage to the command table where Halric Dune's casualty reports lay stacked in neat red folders. Neatness had always been his weapon. It made pain look approved. Bring the retreat report, she said. Halric's voice returned to calm. A battlefield report cannot be compared to wound cloth. No, Clarabelle answered, but it can be compared to timing. Radnor Kelm took the top folder himself. Which report? The one prepared before the wounded entered my tent. Halric's jaw tightened for the first time without disguise. The Alpha King saw it. So did everyone else. Radnor opened the folder. His eyes moved down the page, then stopped. Casualty estimates entered before second retreat intake. Clarabelle nodded. Read the numbers. 6 common soldiers wounded during heroic extraction. 3 officers credited for holding retreat discipline. Bren made a sound that was almost a laugh and almost a sob. Clarabelle did not look away from Halric. Now read the names of the officers credited. Radnor's hand tightened on the paper. Orlan, Grell, Merrick's surgeon line assisting. Captain Orlan stepped back. That does not mean... Stop, Radnor said. The single word made the red canvas tremble. Clarabelle placed Joran's bandage record, Tomer's bandage record, and Bren's bandage record beside the retreat report. Read pattern beside reward. Nerrit laid moon-silver strips across the officer names and wound records. The linen did not judge. It did not rage. It matched timing, pressure angle, and command steel trace against written reward. Silver lines formed slowly. Officer credit entered before wound intake. Wound pattern matched credited officer blade. Retreat injury listed before war tent recording. The old supply tent went still around the words. Halric bowed his head. Reports are drafted in advance. Commanders estimate losses constantly. That is not deception. That is administration, Clarabelle said. Then your estimates were strangely faithful to wounds no one had received yet. Radnor looked at the officers. Who ordered common wounds made to support the retreat report? No one answered. Clarabelle turned to the common soldiers. No man has to speak through fear. Touch your bandage only if you want the record to answer for you. One by one, wounded soldiers lifted trembling hands to the moon-silver linen around their bodies. The tent filled with bloodless writing. Orlan's command blade. Grell's command blade. Surgeon line screen. Wound after retreat horn. Credit entered before wound intake. Radnor looked as if each line had taken something from him he should have surrendered long ago. Halric spoke softly. Your Majesty, if officers staged minor wounds, it was to preserve courage after a dangerous retreat. Panic kills packs. Sometimes morale requires managed truth. Clarabelle's face hardened into something older than anger. Managed truth is what men call a lie when women are asked to clean it. Radnor turned to Halric. You knew. Halric did not deny it. He chose law. I knew the campaign would fail if common soldiers described retreat as disorder. I knew officers needed visible sacrifice. I knew you needed victory before the northern packs scented weakness. And you cut men under my banner? I permitted controlled wounds under surgeon supervision. The supply tent contracted around those words. Clarabelle stepped between the cots and the officers. No wound is controlled when the man beneath it is common enough to be used. Radnor faced the entire tent. His voice was rough, but it carried. Clarabelle Thist warned me that the wounds did not match the East Ridge wolves. I refused blade testing. I removed her from active authority because the truth would have delayed my campaign. That was my order, my failure, and my shame. Halric's eyes flicked toward him. Your Majesty, be silent. Radnor took the removal slate from the command table and broke the red wax with his own thumb. He did not hand it to Clarabelle like a gift. He laid it at her feet like evidence. The removal is void. The reports written over these men are void. Every officer blade, surgeon tag, corridor slate, and moon silver bandage enters open pack record. Halric Dune is stripped of war surgeon command pending pack judgment. Guards moved to Halric. Clarabelle lifted one hand. No. Radnor stopped them immediately. She looked at him. Do not arrest him before the common soldiers finish speaking. Do not make punishment faster than testimony just because guilt finally reached a man with a title. Radnor lowered his head once. As you say. No, she replied, as the record requires. He accepted the correction. That mattered more than obedience. The soldiers spoke until the rain stopped. Not all at once. Not cleanly. Some shook. Some forgot sequence. Some needed Clarabelle to ask the wound instead of the memory. The bandages filled gaps without naming shame as weakness. When the last testimony entered, Radnor stood before Clarabelle with the healer's apron folded over his hands. I cannot return what 40 years cost, he said. I can return what I stole tonight. Your authority, your warning, your name in the war record. Clarabelle looked at the apron. Then at him. You once survived because I disobeyed you, she said. I know. Tonight you punished me for the same courage. His eyes lowered. I know that too. She took the apron. Not his hands. I will treat the wounded, she said. Common soldiers first. Officers after testimony. Commanders after judgment. And me? Radnor asked quietly. Her heart moved. Not young, not foolish, but not dead. You may stand where the truth is being kept, she said. Do not mistake that for forgiveness. I will not. The moon-silver warning bandages brightened once across the cots, then settled into plain linen. Public wound reversal record. Clarabelle Thist's authority was restored after the moon-silver warning bandages proved the new wounds came from Red Moon command steel used after retreat under Halric Dune's surgeon line control, while Alpha King Radnor Kelm publicly entered his removal of her as wrongful damage to evidence and testimony.